If you've ever done a shore entry where there were rocks and fire coral everywhere, you already know the feeling I'm about to talk about. Now, you're in soft neoprene booties, the surge is pushing you around a little bit, and every step you take, you're kind of hoping you don't roll an ankle before you even get into the water. Now, for me personally, that was me when I went to Bonaire last time, and it got so bad that week that I ended up buying a pair of hard-soled boots while I was down there just to get through the rest of the trip. So by the time I got home, I knew hard soles weren't really going to be optional for me anymore. And then at DEMA show last year, I got to talking with a guy named Dan Ellis, who's the man behind these boots. He had me try on a pair right there at the show, and he told me that if I wanted to really put them through it, he'd send me a pair and I could find out how they hold up for recreational diving. Now, if you haven't heard of these before, these are actually boots that were designed for Navy SEALs that are now sitting in my dive bag. Now, here's the thing. A boot built for the military and people that are going over the beach, and a boot that's built for you and me that are going out diving on vacation are not automatically going to be the same product, right? Like it might be overbuilt or overkill for just average recreational diving. So I didn't want to just do an unboxing and say, hey, these are badass because they're for Navy SEALs and tell you like, you should go out and buy them. The US Navy SEALs do it. We should wear them too, right? So instead I went out and actually dove them. I did about 25 dives in warm water and some cold. I did boat entries, shore entries, and overall, I have to say I like them, but I'll get more into that with the video. Now, as a quick disclaimer, like I said, OTB, the company that makes these, they did send these boots to me for free. I do have a link down in the description, and I get a small commission if you buy through that, but there's no cost to you. So that said, they didn't have any say in the script of this video, the direction of the video. They never looked at any footage. They never looked at the script. They're going to see it live for the first time when you're watching it right now. So when I get to the cons and the drawbacks, I hope that kind of proves that I don't think they're for everyone. I do think that there's a use case for them, but not for everyone. So hopefully that doesn't tarnish the review for you. So in this video, I want to answer 3 different things. First, are these actually used by Navy SEALs, or is that just good marketing and for me to get a click, right? Next, do these hold up for regular recreational diving, or again, are they just overkill instead? And then lastly, honestly, who should buy these? Because if you say it's for Navy SEALs, that doesn't necessarily sound like me going on a week-long dive trip in the Caribbean or something like that. Should you maybe just save your money or buy something else instead? Now, if you haven't met me before, I'm Thomas Hughes, a professional scuba instructor, and over the years, I've helped hundreds of new divers feel more confident, comfortable, and safe underwater. With that, let's get into it. So let's start up front with the title and the thumbnail that made you click on this video to begin with, because if that turned out to just be marketing fluff or me just clickbaiting, then this kind of whole video loses the cool factor and all of that, right? So OTB, the brand that actually makes this, that stands for Over the Beach. And that's not just like a company name or term, that's actually a military term that's used for amphibious operations. When you're coming out of the water onto land and performing some type of mission, and everything you've got on you is completely soaked, basically, right? Now, I mentioned in the intro this guy, Dan, that I met at DEMA. Well, he's the reason the whole company exists at all. And it's because the Navy came to him and said, hey, we need you to design a boot for Navy SEALs that are working in and around the water. So he built the whole product line out of focus groups with actual Navy SEAL operators. And, here's the part that I asked him about as well, because it's one thing to say, hey, this was built with Navy SEALs in mind. But he said these specific boots, the actual Pirata Elites that I'm talking about here, they're currently in use by SEAL Team 6 and other special operation units as well. So it's not just inspired by or just like military styling or something like that. Like if you got a camouflage rash guard, it's military style, but these are actually the real thing. So I'll be honest, I can't verify what SEAL Team 6 has on their feet today, and neither can anyone else really outside of those teams. But coming from the guy who, created the company, basically, he builds them. I have no reason not to trust him. So I think that is a credible line to say these are the boots used by Navy SEALs. So, okay, that tells you who they were built for, but it doesn't really answer that question of whether this, is something that you want to use on a dive boat when you're in the Caribbean or something like that, right? Being good enough for SEAL Team 6 and being right for your average recreational diver doing a handful of dives on vacation, or maybe every other year you go out to a quarry or something like that. Those are really different tests that we should do. So let's talk about what actually happened when I got them in the water on my recreational dives. Now, I did want the test to be just a little unfair to the boot to really put it through its paces, so I put them in about every situation I could reasonably get to within a reasonable time frame. I did about 25 dives total. Most of it was warm water, but also some cooler water at the local quarry, Fantasy Lake Adventure Park here in the Raleigh area. I went to Cozumel, Mexico, which is where I did lots and lots of boat diving. And then I did pool dives for a class, and I did some snorkeling in Cozumel as well, where it was really shallow and super rocky. Now, I did boat entries, shore entries, walked around in them both in and out of the water. I ran them with my Apex RK3 fins to test for fit and comfort. And then again, snorkeling, I actually did that without fins on at all because it was so shallow, but it was really rocky. There was urchins everywhere, and I wanted to protect my feet. So the very first thing I noticed is actually not what I expected it to be. So of course, I had some assumptions going into this, and if you've ever worn a military boot in the past, you probably could have the same ones or maybe a hiking boot or something like that. I was expecting that kind of typical combat boot, super stiff, uncomfortable. They need to be broken in, and it's not something I really want to wear longer than I had to until it's broken in. If you didn't know, I'm a veteran myself, and while there are comfortable boots out there, of course, your average boot, especially the ones they typically just standard issue you, they don't start off great until they're broken in. And again, if you've gone out hiking before with a brand new pair of boots, you probably know what I'm talking about. But to be honest, that's not what happened here. These were really comfortable. And I don't mean comfortable for a boot. I mean, like they were actually comfortable. On their product page, they talk about how they feel like a running shoe basically instead. And I don't know if I'd say they're that comfortable, but they're very, very comfortable for me. Whether I was in fins, out of fins, walking around on land, sitting on the boat between dives, I never had that moment where I was like, oh man, I'm out of the water. Let me rip these boots off so I can let my feet freaking, relax for a minute here, right? It was actually really surprising to me. Now, again, I just mentioned it, but there's a reason for that, right? They say it on the product page, but they really do have this kind of running shoe style cushioning that's built into the midsole. So it's not just a like solid piece of hard rubber that has laces on it. It makes them a lot more comfortable for that matter. And, again, for me as recreational divers, you might be wearing this for an entire dive day before you take them off. Or, the way I was diving in Cozumel, doing 2 dives in the morning. So I put them on, go to the dive shop, get on the boat. I'm wearing them until noon. So, it's 4 or 5 hours of wet feet basically in these boots. And the comfort was a nice surprise. But, that said, comfort isn't the only reason you're going to buy a pair of boots like this. So, let's get to the other things that it's actually built to do, so to speak, here and what they're supposed to do well. Now, there are a few things that I really liked that this boot does well, and I wanted to make sure I shared those with you, of course, kind of a pro-con list, right? So one of them, I didn't really believe until I took the boots off, to be honest. But the first is protection. So they have this hard sole, of course. So they have real ankle support, even being a little bit more of a low to mid top, they still had good ankle support. And that's the whole problem I had at Bonaire that I talked about at the beginning of this video, right? Walking over loose rocks with all your heavy gear on, your ankle's doing a lot of work, and soft booties are just not going to help you with that. Now, secondly, this was pretty surprising too, but they dry fast, like really fast. And that might be sounding something like a more of a small thing if you haven't really experienced this before. But if you've ever traveled with your diving gear, you know that having wet gear going into a bag first is kind of disgusting because it's just wet sitting in a confined space, but it also adds more weight to your dive bag, and it can be one of the most annoying parts of a dive trip when you have this gear that's just not dried out fully and you're trying panically to hang it up wherever you can to get it to dry before you go home, right? Now, the reason it dries so quickly is there are drain ports that are built into the sides, and then the lining and the footbed itself are made from materials that don't hold water at all. So the water can basically easily drain out, and since it's not held in the material, it doesn't get like super saturated like some other canvas type shoes would, or just other types of booties in general, like neoprene, for example. Now, third, and this is the one that I said that I was a little bit more skeptical about, but there's actually a knit sock built into the top of the boot on the Pirata Elite version. That's really the biggest difference between the Pirata and Pirata Elite, by the way, is this knit sock. But the idea is that it seals around your ankle, and it's going to keep sand, sediment, tiny rocks, stuff like that from getting down inside the boot. Now, I will say that I was wearing neoprene socks underneath the boots through most of the week that I was wearing them. I just prefer that for comfort. So I do want to be fair here. I probably wasn't going to get any type of irritation from like sand or rocks or sediment rubbing on my foot or anything inside the boot anyway. But I will say that when I pulled these boots off after shore entries, there was nothing in there basically. I mean, there wasn't sand, there wasn't rocks, none of that grit that you usually end up trying to like wash out or shake out afterwards. And I mean, again, I can't say it's perfect, but in my experience over those 25 dives, excuse me, and walking around in general, just kind of stepping into the water, stepping out of the water, I finished shore dives and never had any crap in my boot, which is really nice. And if you've ever finished one and maybe spent a few minutes turning out your booties, trying to rinse them out, like I said, and trying to get that inside cleaned out, for me, that's a win. You've probably experienced that yourself. Now, let's talk about the cons instead. We talked about the highlights and what I really liked, but there's definitely things that would stop me from recommending them to everyone out there. So I want to kind of be real about the catches or the drawbacks as well, right? Now, for me personally, there are two bigger drawbacks that I really want to call out. And the first one matters a lot depending on how much you are traveling to go diving. And that's that they're heavy. I mean, they have a thick rubber sole on them or whatever that material is. So they're just going to be heavier than soft booties are. And this is true for a lot of hard booties, to be fair, but they're a little under 2 pounds. I think they're like maybe 1.6, 1.7 pounds. And that doesn't sound like too much when you say it out loud, but if you're already playing that game where you're weighing your checked bag at home and you have to pull stuff out, stay under the limit, try to put some stuff back in, and you're, oh no, unpack again, that's a real pain point. So having 2 pounds basically, or just shy of 2 pounds of extra weight in your bag is a bit of a con for me when you compare it to, a low top soft booty that probably weighs less than a pound for sure, right? So it's, less than half the weight. Now, again, I want to be fair to the boots here. My first reaction with these when I picked them up was, yeah, they are pretty heavy. But really, I was comparing them to those soft sole booties. So, I actually compared them to some other hard sole boots that I own. And I will say a lot of them actually do weigh in about the same at like, just shy of 2 pounds, maybe 1.5 pounds. Something like the Bear Ultra Warmth, for example, they're right around the same weight as well. So depending on which hard sole boot you have, these may not be any heavier than those, but they just felt sturdy and heavy when I picked them up. So just think about the weight when you're packing, I guess is my point. It kind of just depends on the style of boot you're used to diving with already and the type of diving you're going to be doing. Now, personally, I got around the weight problem in general. When I went to Cozumel, that was actually the lightest packing I've ever done. I have a whole separate video I'll be posting about that here soon, but I was able to fit everything within a backpack carry-on for all of my dive gear. And then I wore my dive boots instead of having to pack them in a like checked bag with clothing or anything like that. So the weight wasn't a problem for me because I just wore boots, and I might have looked a little bit goofy having boots on with shorts on, but to me it wasn't a big deal. And depending on your carry-on, you can always pack them in your carry-on instead, so you're not dealing with the weight on a checked bag. Now, again, I'll be honest, I know most people probably don't want to fly in boots, especially if they're going somewhere that's going to be hot, like the Caribbean. They're probably going to be wearing shorts like I was, and wearing boots and shorts kind of looks weird sometimes, to be honest, right? But personally, I didn't mind that myself. Another call out I want to make, and you might see it here in some of the footage, is these do come with laces that you can tie up and use, and they're actually super comfortable with laces. I just don't love lacing up my boots all the time, so I replaced the laces with bungees. So you'll see orange bungees in some of the footage. Those don't come with it, but I picked them up for like $8 on Amazon. So there's, again, nothing wrong with laces. I just prefer not to have to tie my dive boots, so I can just slip the boot on, pull the bungee, slide the knot down, and I'm good to go. So I just use it that way. Now, let's talk about drawbacks, right? So the next thing that I wanted to call out is the price of these. So the cost is around $175 at the time of recording for the Pirata Elite, and the Pirata are just under that, I believe, with, again, the biggest difference being the knitted sock at the top of the Pirata Elite. For me, that's on the high end compared to a lot of recreational dive boots. Even other hard sole boots are usually a little bit cheaper than that. But what I'd say is that they feel like they're really built to last longer, right? And if you think about the intention of like missions from the military, they're going to be sturdy and they're going to hold up. I also think they're a lot more comfortable and more supportive than what I've used before. I love those Bear Ultra Warmth, for example, but these are more comfortable than them in my opinion, and they're easier to put on and off, and for my foot at least. So I don't think it's bad value, but it is more money up front, and you should know that if you're going to be considering this, that you might spend some more money on a boot like this than you would if you just went to the dive shop and picked up any old hard sole boot. Now, that brings us to probably the only question that actually matters for this video. Are these going to be for you, right? And honestly, my answer kind of changes depending on which of my own trips I started thinking about on when I would or wouldn't take these. So first, if you're doing lots of shore entries, especially with rocky shores with loose footing where you're kind of being really careful with each step, these are a great option. So if you're diving somewhere like Bonaire, for example, where you're climbing over rocks, you're dodging fire coral, there's urchins everywhere, and it's really hard to get into the water without slipping and just being really careful with your steps. The protection and ankle support that these boots give you are great for that, and I'd highly recommend it for sure. The fast drying option is also great. So if you can spare the weight in your checked bag, or you don't mind putting them in your carry-on or just wearing them on your feet when you're flying, I think you're going to be really happy with these, honestly. But on the other hand, take my Cozumel trip that I just got back from. That's boat diving. You giant stride off the back, climb the ladder, done, right? I mean, I could have gotten away with lightweight booties or thinner neoprene booties instead. And I would have saved some space and weight in my bag if I was checking them instead. So if your diving is mostly boat diving or mostly gentle, sandy, easy entries, these may be a little bit more than what you actually need. And that's not a knock on that's not a knock on the boot or anything like that. It's just, it might be more overkill than what you need for recreational diving, right? Now, on the other hand, if you're tech diving or you just feel like the gear is heavy and you want to have better ankle support regardless, even if you're on a boat, it's nice to have good ankle support so you don't slip and fall on the boat, right? These are still a solid choice. And I will say one kind of last practical thing here. People always ask me about this, so I just want to add this in the video. For me personally, I was able to use the exact same fin size, my large Apex RK3s. I use them with soft soles, I use them with other hard sole boots, and I was able to use them with this. That said, I also own a pair of supers, so like the extra large size, I guess, for Apex, they call them supers. That felt more comfortable to me. It wasn't as tight of a fit, so I preferred using those instead. But that doesn't mean that everyone's going to have to size up their fins. It kind of depends on what type of boots you're using right now. If you're already in a similar hard sole boot, you probably have a fin pocket that's already going to fit them just fine, and you won't need to buy new fins. So it's going to be different for everybody, of course, but just wanted to throw that in there because that's a comment that I get pretty often is, do I need to buy new fins if I buy these? Now, if you are interested in picking these up, click the link down in the description below to check them out. It helps support the channel as well, so I'd appreciate it. Now, here's the thing. This whole video has been about just one specific hard sole boot and whether it's right for you, but honestly, that's kind of the smaller question in the grand scheme of things. The bigger one, and the one that I see divers get wrong way more often, unfortunately, is whether you should actually be in a hard sole boot at all, or whether a soft sole is the better call for the type of diving you're doing. And I know I just kind of alluded to this, but if you think about it, most of the time when someone buys the wrong boot, it's not like they bought a bad boot or anything like that. It's just they do a different type of diving and that boot isn't really made for it. You don't have the gear that's made for the diving you're doing. So I made a whole video breaking that process down, soft sole versus hard sole boots, and which one is actually good at different things and how you should figure out which one belongs on your feet when you're going out diving. So with that, click or tap the screen now to watch it and you'll know exactly where a boot like this fits in your diving. As always, stay safe, have fun, and let's go diving.